Welcome. If you are here, you are probably ready to stop. Stop thinking about what happened today. Stop planning what needs to happen tomorrow. Stop the quiet list in the back of your mind that never quite switches off on its own. That is what this is for. Welcome to Eyes Closed Stories, a place where we slow everything down together with stories. Not dramatic stories, not stories that ask anything of you, just long, gentle, interesting stories about ordinary things. The kind of knowledge that is good to have, told in the kind of voice that is good to fall asleep to. Every episode, I will take something from everyday life, something you have used or touched or walked past without even thinking about. And I will tell you its whole story, where it came from, how it was made, the people and accidents and centuries that brought it to you. Your brain will follow along, just enough to feel gently occupied. And then, somewhere in the middle of the story, without deciding to, you will drift. That is the idea. So here is what I would like you to do right now. Find your position, the one you actually sleep in, not the polite sitting up position, but the real one. Put the blanket up if you have one. Let your shoulders drop away from your ears. Unclench your jaw if it was clenched. It usually is. Take one slow breath in through your nose and let it out slowly through your mouth. You don't need to do anything with your hands. Just let them rest. You don't need to keep your eyes open. Let them close when they want to. You are not going to miss anything important. This story will keep going. I will keep talking. All you have to do is listen, or not listen, or somewhere in between, which is the best place to be. Tonight's story is about the secret life of glass. It is a longer story than you might expect. It goes further back than you might think. And by the end of it, if you make it that far, you'll know something you did not know before, about something you have probably never thought about twice. But first, just breathe. Let the day go. It was what it was. Tomorrow is not here yet. Right now, there is only this. Your breath, this voice, and a story that is about to begin. Are you ready? Then let's begin. Close your eyes or leave them open for now. Softly unfocus, resting on whatever is near you. Somewhere in this room, Or maybe just outside it, there is glass, a window perhaps, a cup, a mirror on the wall, the screen of a phone, dark and still, a light bulb, a picture frame, a bottle holding something ordinary, water or olive oil or forgotten perfume. You have touched glass today without thinking about it. You have looked through it. You have poured from it. You have seen your own face in it. And yet, almost no one knows glass's history, where it came from, how long it took to become what it is. The strange and quiet journey from the edge of a volcano to a Phoenician cooking fire to the window beside your bed. Tonight, that is the story we are going to tell. There is no rush. We have the time we need. Let your body settle a little bit more into whatever you are resting. Feel the weight of the blanket or the softness of the pillow beneath your head. Notice the temperature of the air in your face. The story of glass begins long before any human being made it. It begins with volcanoes. When a volcano erupts, and this has happened millions of times over the long history of this planet, it sends rivers of molten lava pouring down its side. Lava is liquid rock. It is unimaginably hot, and as it flows, it carries with it the raw ingredients of something extraordinary. When that lava reaches cool air or cool water, it begins to harden. But sometimes, when the lava cools very, very quickly, something unusual happens. Molecules don't have time to arrange themselves into neat crystals the way most rock does. Instead, they freeze in place, disordered, tangled, locked into a strange state that is neither quite liquid nor quite solid. The result is a dark, smooth, glassy rock called obsidian. Obsidian is nature's glass. It forms at the edge of lava flows where the heat meets the cold. You can find it on the slopes of volcanoes in Iceland, in Japan, in Ethiopia, in New Mexico. Smooth and black and slightly translucent at the edges, like a dark mirror that the earth made for itself. For tens of thousands of years, human beings found obsidian and understood immediately that it was special. When you chip obsidian carefully with another stone, it breaks into edges sharper than almost anything else in the natural world. Sharper than metal, sharper than bone. Surgeons today sometimes still use obsidian blades for the most delicate procedures because no steel scalpel can quite match the fineness of that edge. Ancient people made arrowheads from obsidian, knives, scrapers, ritual objects, and they traded it across vast distances. Archaeologists have found obsidian tools in places hundreds of miles from the nearest obsidian source, which means that long before cities or writing or markets, people were carrying this volcanic glass across mountains and rivers because they knew it was worth carrying. Obsidian was the first glass that human hands ever held, but it wasn't the glass that human hands ever made. That came much later, and it came, like so many things, from an accident near a fire. The ancient writer Pliny the Elder, a Roman who lived 2,000 years ago and who wrote down almost everything he found interesting about the natural world, told a story about the origin of glass. He said the Phoenician merchants traveling along the coast of what is now Syria stopped one evening on a beach to cook their meal. They needed something to rest their cooking pots on over the fire, and so they used blocks of natron, a mineral salt that they were transporting as cargo. The fire burned, the meal cooked, the merchants ate and slept. And in the morning, when they raked through the ashes, they found something strange beneath their pots. The natron had melted in the heat and combined with the sand of the beach and formed a shining, translucent stream of something new. Glass. Now, historians are careful about this story. Pliny was writing it down centuries after it supposedly happened, and a simple beach campfire probably wouldn't get hot enough to truly melt sand into glass. The real origin of glass making is almost certainly more gradual, more industrial, more complicated than one lucky morning on a beach. But here is what is true. Glass is made from sand, melted sand, combined with other minerals is exactly what glass is. And the basic ingredients, silica from sand and alkali to lower the melting point, heat, were all the things that people in the ancient Middle East had access to. The earliest manufactured glass objects we have found come from Mesopotamia and Egypt around 3,500 years ago. They are small, beads mostly, colored in deep blue and greens and amber yellows, made by melting raw materials together and shaping them while still soft. These early glassmakers were doing something extraordinary. Even if they didn't fully understand the chemistry of it, they had learned that sand, ordinary, unremarkable beach sand, the kind you walk on without a second thought, could be transformed with enough heat and the right minerals into something transparent, something smooth, something that light could pass through. No other material in the ancient world did that. Stone didn't, pottery didn't, metal didn't, wood didn't. Only glass let you hold the light. For centuries, glassmaking was slow. Objects were small. Production was limited. Glass was rare and expensive. Colored beads and small vessels for perfumes or coal, owned mostly by the wealthy. And then, sometime around 2,000 years ago, in the region that is now Syria or Israel or Lebanon, the historical record is not entirely certain. Someone invented the blowpipe. It is a deceptively simple tool, a long metal tube, hollow all the way through, perhaps a meter long. A glass blower heats a gather of molten glass at one end, a glowing orange honey-thick blob of liquid glass on the tip of the pipe, and then they bring the other end to their lips, and they blow. Breath goes in, the glass expands. The glass blower turns the pipe slowly, constantly, to keep the glass from drooping under gravity. They blow again. They shape with tools, wooden paddles, metal shears. They reheat when the glass begins to stiffen. They blow again. And from that breath, from that single hollow tube, a vessel emerges, a bottle, a cup, a flask. The blowpipe changed everything. Suddenly, glass could be made quickly, in large quantities, in complex shapes, thin-walled and elegant. A glass blower with skill and practice could produce dozens of vessels in a single day. Glass became affordable. Glass spread. The Roman embraced it completely. Roman cities had glass workshops. Roman homes had glass windows. Not the clear float glass we know today, but small panes of greenish, bubbly, imperfect glass that let in a soft and wavering light. Roman tables had glass cups and glass bottles. And when you look at a piece of Roman glass today in a museum, beneath careful lighting, behind its own pane of modern glass, you can sometimes still see the mark of the marker's breath, a slight unevenness, a bubble caught inside, a swirl in the surface where the pipe was turning. Someone's breath frozen in glass for 2,000 years. There is something very quiet about that. Let's pause for a moment in our story and talk about what glass actually is. Because glass is strange, scientifically, genuinely strange. Most solid materials are crystalline. That means The molecules are arranged in a regular, repeating pattern like a very neat grid. Salt is a crystalline, ice is a crystalline, metal is a crystalline, mostly. If you could zoom into the molecular level, you would see order, pattern, repetition. Glass is not like this. Glass is what scientists call amorphous solid. Its molecules are disordered, arranged randomly, the way they would be in a liquid, but frozen in place. Glass is sometimes described somewhat poetically as a liquid that forgot to flow. Disoriented structure is why glass is transparent. Light passes through the gaps between the randomly arranged molecules without being scattered or blocked the way it would be in a crystalline material. It is also why glass breaks the way it does, not along neat lines, the way a crystal might cleave, but in unpredictable curves and shards, following the random internal stresses of its disordered structure. You may have heard that glass flows very slowly, that old church windows are thicker at the bottom because the glass has sagged over centuries. This is a myth. Old windows are thicker at the bottom because of how they were made, not because the glass has moved. At room temperature, glass is not flowing. It is thoroughly, completely solid, but at the right temperature, around 700 to 800 degrees Celsius for common glass, it softens. It becomes viscous, thick like a slow honey, hot enough, and it flows freely. This is the temperature of the glassblower's furnace. This is the temperature at which the glass becomes something you can shape with breath and tools and skills. Glass remembers heat. It was made by heat, and heat is what makes it soft again. At some point in the story of glass, a glassmaker discovered something new. If you coated the back of a piece of flat glass with a thin layer of metal, tin or silver or mercury, the glass becomes a mirror. Not just a dim reflection in still water, not just a polished bronze disc that showed you a burly approximation of your face, a true, clear, detailed mirror. For most of human history, people could not clearly see their own faces. Think about that for a moment. You could see the faces of everyone around you. Your parents, your children, your neighbors, the strangers in a market, but your own face was only ever glimpsed in reflections that were imperfect. Rippling water, polished metal, the brief, uncertain image that disappeared the moment the surface moved. The glass mirror changed this. Venice, in the 13th and 14th centuries, became the center of mirror making in Europe. Venetian glassmakers were the best in the world. Their techniques were so valuable that the Republic of Venice moved all its glassmakers to the island of Murano to keep them together, easier to watch. Glassmakers who tried to leave Venice and take their knowledge with them were, according to some accounts, were hunted. The secrets of Venetian glass were worth protecting. A Venetian mirror could sell for the equivalent of a small estate. In the palace of Versailles, Louis XIV built the Hall of Mirrors, a long gallery lined on one side with 17 arched mirrors, reflecting the 17 windows opposite them. It was a demonstration of wealth and power on a scale that made visitors feel dizzy. Mirrors that large, that clear, were almost inconceivably expensive. Only a king could line an entire room with them. And in ordinary homes in the same era, a single mirror was a precious object passed down through families, carefully stored, occasionally insured. Now you have one in your pocket, built into your phone. Every photograph you have ever taken of yourself, every selfie, every reflection you have paused to look at is a part of this long, strange history, the history of people learning to see themselves. A window is such an ordinary thing. You probably have one near you now. Maybe you can hear faint sounds through it, traffic, or wind in leaves, or rain if you are lucky enough to be listening to rain tonight. But for most of human history, windows did not exist in the way we know them. Early human shelters had openings, gaps in walls for light and air. But these openings were open, just holes to close them against cold or rain. You hung cloth or animal skin or wooden shutters. These kept out the weather, but they also kept out the light. When you closed your shelter against winter, you sat in the dark. The Romans made some progress with glass windows. Those small, greenish, imperfect panes we mentioned earlier. But after the fall of Rome in the West, glass-making knowledge declined in Europe, and glass windows became rare again. What kept the tradition alive more than almost anything else were churches. Medieval cathedrals used stained glass, colored panes of glass held together with lead to fill their enormous windows. Stained glass was not about seeing through. It was about light itself, colored light pouring in through images of saints and angels and biblical stories, filling the interior of the church with something that felt, to people who had never seen anything like it, almost miraculous. The technical skill required to make stained glass was immense. Glassmakers had to learn how to color glass with metal oxides, cobalt for blue, copper for green, gold for a warm red, and how to cut the glass into precise shapes, and how to assemble those shapes into images using strips of lead. The great cathedral windows of Chartres and Canterbury and Cologne are some of the most extraordinary things human beings have ever made. They are also quietly some of the oldest glass still in use in the world. Some of those windows have been filtering lights into those buildings for 800 years. Ordinary household windows, clear, flat, functional, became affordable and common in Europe only gradually through the 16th and 17th centuries. Before that, even in relatively prosperous homes, windows were small and few. Cold houses, dark rooms, the idea of sitting by a large window in warmth, watching rain or snow outside, that was a luxury almost no one had. Now we build entire walls from glass, skyscrapers made almost entirely of it, catching the sky. Sometime in the 13th century in Europe, someone discovered that a piece of glass shaped in a particular way, thick in the middle, thin at the edges, convex on both sides, could do something remarkable. It could make small things look larger. The first recorded use of this discovery was practical and humble. Reading glasses, spectacles, small lenses set into frame, held before the eyes of monks and scholars and merchants who found that their vision was failing as they aged, who could no longer read the small letters in manuscripts and account books. The magnifying lens gave people back their sight. But then, slowly, over the next few centuries, people began to wonder what else lens could do. If one lens magnified, what could two lenses do? What if you put one at each end of the two? In the early 1600s, a Dutch eyeglass maker named Hans Lippershey applied for a patent on a device he called kijker, a looker, a tube with lens at each end. We call it a telescope. Within a year of hearing about this device, Galileo Galilei had built his own improved version and turned it towards the sky. He saw mountains on the moon. He saw that Jupiter had moons of its own. He saw that Venus went through phases like our moon. He saw the Milky Way resolve into countless individual stars. The universe, which had seemed finite and orderly and centered on the earth, suddenly became incomprehensibly large and strange, all from two curved pieces of glass set into a tube. And around the same time, in the other direction, a very small direction, the microscope was being developed. Anthony van Leeuwenhoek, a Dutch draper with no formal scientific training, spent decades in the late 1600s grinding lenses of extraordinary precision, lenses so small they were barely larger than a pinhead, lenses that could magnify things 270 times. He looked through these lenses at everything he could find: rainwater, scrapings of his own teeth, a drop of pond water, and he found, to his own amazement, to the amazement of the entire scientific world, that the world was full of creatures invisible to the naked eye, tiny, swimming, living things, bacteria, protozoa, what he called animalcules, life everywhere that no human eye had ever seen before. The germ theory of disease, the understanding of infection and immunity, the entire field of microbiology, all of it begins, in a sense, with the Dutch lens grinder and his extraordinary glass. Glass opened the universe in both directions, the unimaginably large and the unimaginably small. Let's come back to the ordinary, because glass, for all its grand history, the cathedrals, the telescope, the Venetian mirrors, is mostly something we encountered in very small, very quiet moments. The glass of water on your bedside table, if you have one. Water in glass is ancient. The Romans drank from glass. Medieval monks stored medicine in glass. Somewhere in the long chain of ordinary people living ordinary lives, someone decided that glass was the best thing to hold water in, because it didn't affect the taste, because you could see how much was left, because it could be cleaned completely. Glass is one of the most chemically inert substances we use for storage. It doesn't leach, it doesn't absorb flavors, it doesn't react with what's inside it. This is why glass is still used today for medicine, for wine, for preserved foods, for laboratory chemicals, because glass doesn't change what it holds. Think about the bottles in your kitchen, the jars on the shelf, a jar of honey perhaps, or spices, or pickles. The glass around them is almost invisible. We look through it, not at it, to see what's inside. But the glass is doing something. It is holding, it is preserving, it is keeping air out and flavor in, quietly, without being noticed. Think about a light bulb. The glass envelope of a light bulb is one of the most precisely engineered ordinary objects in the world. It has to be strong enough to hold its shape and thin enough to let light through freely. It has to be made from a glass that won't crack from the heat of the filament inside. It has to be sealed so completely that almost no air can get in, because air would oxidize and destroy the filament. Every time you switch on a light, a small sealed world of glass is doing its job, keeping the heat in, letting the light out, invisible unless you look for it. And your phone screen. Modern smartphone screens are made from what is often called chemically strengthened glass. Glass that has been treated with potassium ions that create a layer of compressive stress at the surface, making it dramatically harder to scratch and crack than ordinary glass. The most common brand for this is Gorilla Glass, made by an American company called Corning. Corning has been making glass since 1851 in the 1960s. In the 1960s, they developed this chemically strengthened glass, originally for other purposes. Decades later, when Apple was looking for a material for its first iPhone screen, they approached Corning, and Gorilla Glass became the surface through which billions of people would come to touch their digital lives every day. And there is a direct line, if you trace it far enough, from the volcanic obsidian that an ancient hunter picked up from a riverbed to the screen you might have touched today before putting it down and closing your eyes. The same basic alchemy, sand and heat and transformation. There is a beach in California near the town of Fort Bragg called Glass Beach. For much of the 20th century, that stretch of coastline was used as a dump site. Old appliances, bottles, cans, the ordinary debris of modern life were tossed over the cliffs into the ocean. The practice was eventually stopped. The dump was cleaned up as best it could be. But what the ocean did in the years since is remarkable. The glass, all those broken bottles, all those shards, was tumbled by the waves against the rocks and the sand. Year after year, decade after decade, the sea rolled those broken pieces slowly, endlessly, smoothing the edges, rounding the corners, frosting their surfaces. And now, when the tide pulls back at Glass Beach, the stones are mixed with smooth, frosted, jewel-colored pieces of sea glass, green and brown and white and the rare precious coal-black blue. Each piece worn smooth, each piece still recognizably glass, but transformed from something sharp and discarded into something almost beautiful. People come from far away to walk on that beach and pick up the pieces. Glass turned into something like its origins, worn by water and time, into something soft, something that catches the light without hurting you. There is something in that, if you want to think about it as you drift. The idea that even broken things, given enough time and enough gentle motion, can become something worth finding. So, that is the secret life of glass. From a volcano to a beach fire in ancient Syria, to the workshops of Venus, to a cathedral window catching 800 years of morning light, to the lens of a telescope pointed at Jupiter, to the jar of something ordinary on your kitchen shelf, to the smooth screen you set face down on your nightstand tonight. All of it made of sand and heat and human hands and breath. You are surrounded by it always. This transparent, ancient, endlessly useful thing, this material that lets light through, that holds without changing what it holds, that can be paper thin or inches thick, that can be colored like a jewel or clear as air. It has been part of every chapter of human civilization, and it asks for nothing. It just holds. It just clarifies. It just lets you see through. Let your breath slow now. There is nothing left to do. The glass of the water on your table is doing its quiet work. The window, if you have one, is holding the night outside. The world beyond it can wait until morning. For now, just rest. The story is finished and you are somewhere soft, and the night is long and there is no hurry at all. Sleep well. And that is where we will leave it tonight. You came here to rest, and I hope that is exactly what you are doing right now, or close to it, somewhere in that warm, quiet place between knowing and not knowing, between the story and the sleep. This is the whole point of this. If you made it all the way to the end, or if you are only hearing this now, coming back from somewhere deeper, thank you for being here. It means something that you chose this for you tonight. There will be another story when you are ready for it. Until then, stay exactly where you are. Let your breathing do what it knows how to do, and sleep well. This is Eyes Closed. Good night.